Welcome to Wheel Bearings episode 167, and we've got a little bit of a mashup today. Dan is busy this Sunday morning as Rebecca and I are recording this segment, so Dan will be patching in some conversation that I have with him a little bit later on today. But for right now, I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
And I'm Rebecca Lindland from Rebecca Drives.
And Rebecca, you've been driving the ultimate family hauler this week.
I have been. So I got the chance to drive the 2021 Toyota Sienna minivan. This thing is redesigned. It looks absolutely fantastic. There's such an improvement in the interior. There's a lot to like about this minivan. The first thing is the second row reclining seats. It's like having a Barca lounger in your minivan.
Does it have footrests?
It has footrests. It has a bottom that flips out. My gosh. So awesome. Unfortunately, schedules did not align with the smaller humans in my life, the younger ones. So we had a road trip planned, and unfortunately, school, that evil thing, interrupted our plans.
What is this school thing? Is that stuff that you do at home over Zoom?
Yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do it, but my niece Avery was willing to at least sit in the driveway and have a good time playing around with everything. So the interior is vastly improved from the previous version of this. They just, the materials are really nice on it. I mean, obviously, I think I had a fully loaded one, a pre-production model, because it's not on sale yet, but they just did a really great job with it. There's kind of a place for everything. One of the things I loved about it is that there's on the center console on the right side, first of all, there's a really nice, very intuitive gear selector, which I like. It's just, I didn't have to practice in my driveway, you know what I mean, to learn how to select all the different gears. And then tucked in front of that is a wireless charging pad that also has USBs. And so your phone is accessible without being in a cup holder or something. It's without being right in front of you. So you can't see the screen, but it's accessible, which I like, because sometimes you don't want to be fumbling around for your phone.
Well, you should never be fumbling around for your phone while you're driving.
But even at a traffic light or something, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, even if you're stopped, at a traffic light or something, it's just, I prefer to have it accessible without being a distraction. And I think they did a good job with that. On the left side is this little...
Hold on. Before you proceed, one quick question. Does it have support for wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, or is it just through the USB?
It's only through the USB, because when I didn't have it plugged in, I did not have access to Android Auto.
Okay.
When I did use Android Auto, it was excellent, though. So you can escape from the Entune system. So the other fun thing is on the left side is at that same kind of mid-level is this little flat surface. It's about 3 inches long and about 2 inches deep. And it's perfect for a mask. So it's very on trend.
Yeah.
Which I loved.
Is that slot, intended to be like for sticking a phone or something in there?
No, it's smaller than that. I'm thinking maybe change. Okay. I don't know if people still have toll booths around. I know some do. But, maybe put the key there for maybe. But I really found it was actually an ideal place to keep my mask. Rather than in the cup holder.
Right.
And so fold it up neatly. You can keep it there. You can always have a mask in the car. So I really liked that. Just the overall, when you buy a minivan, you buy it with a family in mind. And even though I forgot to get married, I can still get into that mindset of having a family.
Well, I mean, you're in the fortunate position, I think, of having an on-demand family, because you have lots of siblings and they have kids, and so you can take the kids for short bursts of time. You don't have to worry about putting money away into a college fund and dealing with all the vagaries of adolescence and. Don't even get me started.
Exactly. Believe me, I have yet to regret not getting married. But it's. But when I get into this mindset of, if my nieces and nephews were with me, or my friend Lorraine's kids who I went on vacation with back in the summertime, and they actually have the old version of the Toyota minivan. So there's just the right amount of durability in the materials, of luxury for the parents, of really thoughtful touches in this. And I just think they did a really, really nice job with it. It looks really nice. It has for a minivan, it has a relatively sleek appearance. The proportions are never going to be great because you always have a really short overhang with minivans, and that
it's a box on wheels, which is meant for hauling people and stuff, which it's designed around a specific kind of task, a specific kind of use case, and there is no other form factor that does those use cases better than a minivan.
Exactly.
So many families today use SUVs and crossovers, but I've always thought that they were extremely compromised for the use case of hauling a family, because having gone through the process of having kids that went from little to adult.
Amazing. How they do that.
One of the, trying to strap kids into booster seats and child seats, with an SUV that sits up higher and you got hinged doors and all this. We never had a minivan, on a full-time basis. I had them at various times, as test vehicles. And it was always better having a minivan. The sliding doors. That is the
sliding doors are amazing
because, whenever kids open the door, if there's a car beside you, there's going to be a dent in that door, afterwards. Sliding doors, you never have to worry about that. You always have lots of space. The floor, you're up high enough, but, you have that big opening and the floor is lower. It's easier to reach in to get the kids situated and get them buckled in properly and everything. It's just such a much better vehicle for that use case.
No, it really is. I love the easy ingress and egress, and it actually is ideal for grandparents as well. Mm-hmm. If you live near your grandchildren, to be able to go and pick them up from school, to be able to, when you're taking them places, it really fits a variety of lifestyles. The other thing too, lifestyles and stages, I should say, the back seats, this was very, very clever. So the one that I had was a 7-seat, and because it has the captain's chairs in the middle, but the back row, that third row, it was a fold flat. And then when you needed the third row and you could pull them up, it was a little bit awkward to get them into position. But once they were in position and locked in position, you still had a big amount of room behind those seats for things like luggage and stuff. And, I think about my friend Lorraine's kids. There's 4 kids and there's 6 people in that van all the time. And like when we went down to Virginia, we had a lot of stuff that we needed to pile in there, and having the ability to that extra couple of feet, there was a lot of room in the back also where you could really put, it went down really deep and you could put a lot of stuff in there. And again, I appreciated that. There was a cooler in the middle, the AV screens that came down, all sorts of stuff.
So when you say the third row seats fold flat, is that the style of seats that you fold them down and then they flip back into that lower bin behind the rear wheels?
Yes, but there was an additional lower bin then still when they were locked in place. I'll send you a picture.
Okay.
Because then I put luggage, I put groceries back in there. I went to IKEA. Yeah. I went up to IKEA and didn't buy any furniture, but bought a couple of things. And so I'll make sure that we have pictures of it to show you what I'm talking about, because I was really pleasantly surprised at how much room there was back there. There's a cooler in the middle, which my niece loved. The only thing is that when you she folded down this really large, like kind of movie screen that they have in the middle of the vehicle. And when I went to look in my rearview mirror, it was completely blocked, fully blocked, which makes sense because it's enormous, but it's just something to keep in mind when you're driving. that you're really going to compromise your rear view mirror. I don't know, and I apologize, I don't know if it has that cool thing that GM vehicles and Land Rover has where it turns into a camera.
Yeah, I'm looking at the press release right now. It does offer a digital rear view mirror, and that looks like that center HD screen is at 11.6 inches. So that is a good size.
It's a good size.
And they looks like they do offer a camera mirror system, which you would definitely want to take advantage of.
Right, you would. Now, with that system, of course, that means that you can't see the inside of the car because the rear view mirror turns into a camera and it shows you the
view from outside.
The view from outside, your rear view, what would be your rear view mirror view, but then you can't see the inside of it. And I'm not doing a very good job describing this, but there's just a lot to like in this thing. This was also the hybrid version, which is a new choice for the Toyota Sienna. Technically, it has a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, a 243 horsepower. It does have a CVT. And I think the only thing I really had an issue with, because there were so many good things about it, was, man, that CVT, it felt underpowered in many conditions. And it also was incredibly loud. This was a pre-production model. I'm really, really hoping that they put additional insulation in the engine compartment because, for instance, I was on a call and as I'm going up the hill on the Merritt Parkway, which is very, very hilly nearby here, Route 15, I had to apologize to the person I was on the phone with and say, I hope you can still hear me because it was so loud in the car. So I'm hoping that's a pre-production issue. I felt, there's so many really good 4-cylinders. A 2.5 liter should be good. Sam and I were talking earlier, the Toyota Highlander hybrid has it. And I definitely didn't have that same feeling. And again, I wonder, I was by myself in this thing for 99% of the time I was driving it. I can't imagine what it would be like under full load. I think it would be, I felt like it was straining. I was kind of disappointed in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, this is the same powertrain that's in, you mentioned the Highlander hybrid. It's also in the Camry, in the Avalon.
It was great in the Avalon. Yeah,
it's in all of Toyota's larger front drive vehicles. It's the exact same powertrain. One thing that's interesting, in fact, the hybrid is the only powertrain option right now for the 2021
Is it
Sienna.
really? So I wasn't sure because they haven't, the full specs are not out there yet. But yeah, that's the only one.
That's the only thing they have listed right now. They may offer a V6 later. Who knows?
Yeah. But. Well, and I wonder if they'll offer a 4-cylinder non-hybrid. Would that make any difference?
I don't know. I mean, if you had a 4-cylinder non-hybrid, it would probably have less power than the hybrid powertrain.
Wow.
Because with the hybrid, you've got that extra juice from the electric motor in addition to the 4-cylinder. Now, in the hybrid configuration, the 4-cylinder runs a little bit differently. It runs on what they call an Atkinson cycle, which has a little bit less power and torque. So a normal 4-cylinder, 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, typically the way you find it in most applications, including most Toyotas, where they have that option, like in the Camry. The output of the 4-cylinder is greater than the output of the 4-cylinder that's the hybrid, but it's less than the total combined output of the engine plus the electric motor. So, I think a 4-cylinder, if the hybrid is straining in this thing, the standard 4-cylinder probably would be as well. But it seems odd because, the hybrid in the Highlander, didn't really seem to, be straining very much. It seemed to have adequate power. So I wonder if there's something about the calibration on this pre-production model that wasn't quite up to snuff.
Maybe. I mean, I did try it there's 3 modes available. I tried it in all 3 modes. Sport was a little bit, but I think also part of it was that it was so loud, and I shouldn't confuse loudness with straining, but and the CVT.
You're hearing it work.
Right. I'm hearing it and it feels painful. Like I wanted to, I'm sorry, but I need to get onto the highway.
Well, and that's kind of the opposite of what you typically expect in a hybrid. A hybrid should generally be quieter, because you're going back and forth between, engine off, engine on modes. And typically manufacturers try to keep that engine on mode quieter so you don't notice that transition as much. Right.
And the sport mode is designed to give more acceleration. They describe it unlocks boost from the hybrid system for improved acceleration response. It wasn't noticeable enough, but it is there. And perhaps this is a pre-production situation where if it was quieter, I may not have noticed the straining as much. It was, the CVT was also incredibly whiny. I mean, it was kind of all the time, I felt like. So, driving around town, it's not a big deal. Certainly on the highway, though, it was very, very noticeable to me. So that was, and it's funny because it says, in the press release, it says the Sienna driver will feel ultra smooth acceleration and hear very little noise. That is the exact opposite of my experience with this thing. So they also estimate fuel economy at 33. I got 26.6. So I wasn't really anywhere close to that. And I would not say that I was abusing it. I think I drove, typically 60 to 65 on the highway. I don't think I was particularly aggressive with this. It was, again, just something that I noticed almost immediately that it was very, very loud. So hopefully their plans for the model that they release, the typical production models will have more engine insulation because otherwise there was a lot to love. I love the big 7-inch multicolor display. I got a lot of, it was easy to use. It was intuitive to use. The infotainment system. So there's a lot in here. And the pricing, while it hasn't been announced, the current Sienna starts at about 35. And I would think that we could see something, in that range, maybe a little bit higher for the hybrid. The current Sienna, 2020 Sienna, starts at 34.4, and then the higher trims go up to 37, 38 in that range. But, lots of safety equipment on it, lots of good things. I'll be curious to see as these vehicles come out, what the response is to just the noise from the engine.
Especially, if they do offer a regular non-hybrid version.
Yes.
I think right now they're, because minivan sales have declined a lot over the last decade, I would guess they're probably leaning towards just sticking with the hybrid only. Because, and they're doing that with the Venza as well, the new midsize crossover.
Yes. Yep.
It's also only available with this hybrid powertrain.
Which is funny because I had that, and I don't know if I spoke about it on the show, actually. I was thinking about that because I definitely didn't have that same experience. So I am wondering if this was just a pre-production issue with the noise, the in-cabin engine noise, because the Venza I thought was terrific. And the same thing with the Avalon. So, I'm hoping that this was just a pre-production issue because it's, I would definitely encourage our listeners to, if you're in the market for a minivan, to go and test it out once they come out and just pay attention to the engine noise, pay attention to the CVT and what your experience is with it. I don't know, maybe if you have the infotainment system on and you have kids in the car and there's a lot of noise inside the car, you won't notice it as much. I was, again, a little disappointed. The other thing I wanted to mention too is when you were talking about the sliding doors, just a little pro tip. I always try, if I have the option, I try and park next to a minivan as opposed to an SUV, because while the driver may not be paying as much attention, you're not going to get a door ding with the sliding doors.
Excellent point. And one last thing on the powertrain side, it wouldn't surprise me if, in the next year or so, if Toyota actually offers a Sienna Prime with the plug-in hybrid system that's on the RAV4 Prime and the Prius Prime, and that, in the RAV4, the RAV4 Prime, the plug-in hybrid, is actually the most powerful version of the RAV, and it's just over 300 horsepower, and it's quick. Yeah. So that might be the direction that Toyota is planning to go instead of offering a V6.
Well, and when you think about the Chrysler Pacifica hybrid, and they have a plug-in version of it, I definitely didn't have these kinds of noise issues and perception of underpowered, right? And again, part of it could be just from the noise because it was so obvious. But again, it's still, there's so many good things about it that I still think that if you're in the market for one, it's definitely worth a test drive on it.
Cool. All right. Well, hopefully we'll find out a little bit more soon. All right. I had the Audi S5 Sportback. Originally, the A5, was the coupe based on the A4, the midsize A4 sedan. And then they had a convertible, and then they added the Sportback. And the Sportback is a 5-door hatchback, fastback hatchback. And, it's certainly not, as sexy looking as the coupe and convertible, but, I actually really like it. I really like this form factor, the hatchback form factor.
I love the Audi hatchbacks. They just do such a great job.
Yeah, and this is, it's very much like the A7, just kind of a 3/4 scale version of the A7. So, it's got, everything we love about driving Audis. It's got a really tight button-down feel to it. The car itself feels really solid. Always, really nice premium materials, really well executed interior. They did a mid-cycle update on the A4, A5 platform last year, I think. They switched up the infotainment system. The A4, A5 series was one of the last Audis to have the center MMI controller. They've gone to a touchscreen setup now. It's not the same as what we've previously talked about, on the bigger Audis, where they have the dual touchscreen system, where you have an upper and a lower screen, and they have haptic feedback on there. This is just more standard, and this one, definitely has more of that tacked on look where, it looks like a tablet that's been bolted to the top of the dashboard. It doesn't feel integrated or designed in. The interface is fine. It's not. It's good. It's a good interface. I mean, I don't have to go on and on. Again about how much I hate touchscreens in cars. Have I mentioned that I hate touchscreens in cars?
Wait, you may have mentioned it once or twice.
Yeah. I actually preferred the old setup with the MMI controller, but it is what it is. I have to deal with it. So it's. It's a decent interface. It's got support for Android Auto and CarPlay, not wireless yet, but it does have the support for both systems in there. The system is clean enough. It's responsive, so that part is good. The S5 is kind of the middle of the range. So, in this, in typical Audi fashion, you have the A models, which are the mainstream models. The S5 are sportier models, and then you have the RS models, which are the more hardcore models. Those are the equivalent to the BMW M's and the AMGs. The S models are more the M Sport and AMG line, I think is what Mercedes calls theirs. So it's that middle level. It's got a 3-liter twin turbo V6 engine, 349 horsepower. All-wheel drive. It's a Quattro in typical Audi fashion. 8-speed Tiptronic automatic transmission. it's this one had a bunch of options on there. It had the Prestige package on there with the Bang & Olufsen audio system, which sounds great. The Audi virtual cockpit, the heads-up display.
Did you try the traffic jam assist?
I did try it. I did try it. To the degree I was able to. The Audi ADAS stuff, the adaptive cruise control and traffic jam assist generally work really well. It's very smooth, and it's also got what they call side assist, which is it uses the radar sensors on the rear corners, which are used for blind spot monitoring. So what it does is, if it detects a vehicle in your blind spot on either side, when you put on the turn signal to do a lane change, right. It will alert you that there's something there, and also give some steering assist to try to keep you in the lane. If you can push through it, but it will try to keep you in the lane if possible, to avoid a collision there. So those are some really good things. The engine, that 3-liter twin turbo V6, lovely engine, really smooth. Like I talked about when I talked about the Cadillac CT4V a few weeks back. It doesn't feel exceptionally powerful, even though it's 350 horsepower, almost just shy of 350, and all-wheel drive. It doesn't feel like it's leaping off the line, but it's definitely quick. So it doesn't quite have the visceral appeal or the visceral experience that you would have like if you went to an RS. Right. If you had an RS5, that would tend to have a much more aggressive feel to it. This is a much more refined feel.
It's funny that you said that, because that was sort of my feedback from the Q7 that I had, was that it was so refined as to almost eliminate that emotional connection to the vehicle. Like it was, I want to feel some G-forces going on. Yeah. And, I don't want those smoothed out.
Yeah, you can definitely feel the G's, when you're cornering. I mean, it's great handling, great cornering. And you'll feel the G's. I mean, it's quick, but it doesn't feel as quick as it is. It's kind of hard to describe.
But there's almost like a disconnect.
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a disconnect, because this is exactly how I felt with the Q7. It's just interesting that you bring that up in what is supposed to be a sports sedan or hatchback thing.
Yeah, and when you put it in dynamic mode, I think it is what they call it. The sport mode. You do get a little bit more sound, and I like the sound that this engine makes. It's not kind of the rumbling V8 sound. It's a much more refined precision mechanical sound, but it's really good. It's not loud, but it's there, so you get some of that. So that does help, to enhance that visceral feeling. But it's definitely not, a hardcore sports machine. It doesn't have that kind of feel to it. The one I had was on the optional 20-inch five twin spoke wheels, which are great looking wheels. It was on summer tires, and even on those 20s, the ride quality was still really good.
Nice.
And this is one of the things that Audi's done really well, is getting a balance between handling and ride quality. Not sacrificing ride quality even with the big wheels and tires. I mean, you'll feel the road, but it doesn't pound you. So it does a good, especially the small sharp inputs from the road. Those still get filtered out pretty well. So it does a really good job with that. The nice thing about having the hatchback is you have a big cargo area in the back. I think there's about 25 cubic feet in the back with the rear seats up. And then if you need to carry larger stuff, and you can always drop the seats down and have, I think, close over 50 cubic feet of cargo space in the back, which if you're finding stuff at a garage sale or estate sale, or bringing stuff home from the big box store, you can easily fit it in there without any problem. So
I remember years ago, when I was moving from Massachusetts down to Connecticut, I had the S7 was my media car that week.
Oh.
But I loaded that thing, and it was definitely like the sexiest moving van that I've ever seen because you could fit a ton in there. That's what I love about hatchbacks is that they're so practical, but they don't look practical, but they secretly are.
Yeah.
Very fun.
In most cases, unless you're piling stuff all the way up to the roof, so you can't see out the back, they've got as much or more space typically in there than you would find in a comparable sized SUV or crossover.
Right.
So
the sloping roof line is always a little compromised, but
but most people aren't piling stuff up all the way up to the roof anyway most of the time. So you still have plenty of room back there for stuff. So even if you're going on a road trip, with your partner and another couple, or with with kids, you still have room for 4 suitcases and assorted other accoutrements in the back there without any problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's it's a very practical vehicle, not inexpensive. The one I had, including the destination charge, came to $69,240. But in this segment, in this premium segment, it's competitive. It's about what you'd pay. I mean, I think the Cadillac was similarly priced, if I recall correctly.
And the 3 Series, I think, is similarly priced.
3 Series, and BMW is discontinuing the 3 Series GT, the Grand Touring. I think they dropped it at the end of last year, which would have been the closest comparable vehicle to this. And that one was never as sleek looking as the Audis. They were always a little bit taller, a little frumpier looking. And this one, so this one, always had a more sporty feel to it than the 3 Series GT. So that's gone. Mercedes has never really offered anything, quite comparable to this. So there isn't really anything else out there quite like this anymore.
No, there really isn't, because the Genesis G70 is a traditional sedan, right?
Yeah.
Lexus doesn't really have anything.
Probably the closest thing to this would be the Kia Stinger.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not sure how many people are going to cross shop a Stinger, a Kia with an Audi. But actually, in a lot of ways, you really should. You should be cross shopping it. And the Stinger with the twin turbo V6, is going to offer comparable performance to this. It's a similar size, similar form factor, that fastback hatchback design. So if you're, and the Stinger is available with rear wheel drive, which you can't get in the Audi. So if you don't need all wheel drive, and I think the S5 is only available as a Quattro, but the A5 is available in front wheel drive as well.
And, even if you think about, like, even the Tesla Model 3, I was really disappointed when I found out that it wasn't a hatchback, because it's one of the things I liked about the Model S, is that it was. Like, again, thinking, a broad range of these sedan type vehicles that actually are Sportback. Because even the Buick Regal, that was a Sportback, and that's been canceled too.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
that's the only other one kind of in this class.
Right.
So
well, that's fantastic.
Now that we're finished with the garage with Rebecca for the time being, Dan is finally here taking a break from painting his house, and we'll talk about what Dan was driving this week. Dan?
Yeah, I didn't manage to get any on me or on the window.
Well, that's impressive.
Yeah, I didn't even get any on the dog. There was time. I got some on the dog. I have spent the last week in a couple of vehicles that we actually, one of them at least, we just talked about recently. I had the 2021 Nissan Rogue, and so I went back and listened to our segment when you actually did the drive for this.
Yeah, I did the media drive, but I only had a couple of hours with it.
Yeah, well, I got a full week, so it was interesting. I wanted to sort of compare and contrast my impressions versus yours, and I think actually they line up pretty well. The thing that I remember you saying was, like, for all that's good about it, and there's a lot that's good, it's just okay. Like, not necessarily just okay, but it doesn't stand out in the segment.
Right.
And it's admittedly a very tough segment. And I was like, I don't know, I really liked it for the week, but I come back to the same thing. it's a big class. And so it's a much better vehicle. It's nice in and out. But how are you going to remember to recommend it? And I think that's sort of what I wanted to sort of pull on a little bit was, do you think you'd ever find the Rogue sort of at the top of your recommendation list? Would you, or where would you go first?
That's a great question. Obviously, RAV4, that's kind of like the go-to for most people. The CRV is good, at least the gas CRV. The hybrid is, I think is not quite as good as either the RAV4 or the Escape hybrids. If you're interested in a hybrid in this class, and then you've got the new Hyundai Tucson coming up shortly. They recently revealed it. And I have, obviously none of us have driven it yet, but the Tucson, at least from a design standpoint, it really stands out from the crowd. So, those are probably, where I would look. If you're looking for something with more off-road capability, probably, one of the Jeeps, either the Compass or the Cherokee. But, those would probably be the ones I would look to first.
Yeah, I think it's just going to get lost to a certain degree. And I think that's kind of a shame, because I think we agree on the things that are good. The style is good. The interior is good. It's a big upgrade. The powertrain is fine. It's well isolated from the rest of the car, which is nice. I noticed driving the Rogue, one of the things I really liked the most about it was how much they've improved NVH and cut down on road noise. It's quiet, and that's relaxing. And when you have a family vehicle, sometimes you just want some damn quiet.
Yep.
So it's good in that way. And the load area is pretty decent. The front and rear seats, there's no space complaints there. It's really right on for everything it needs to do. So on the paper comparison, it's great. In the real world, it also, it fulfills its mission without much of an issue. The sort of standout stuff that they've managed to do, I think it is that sort of serenity that you have when you drive it, and the powertrain feels really good now. They one of the things I think they did on the Versa and Sentra, and probably during the development of this model too, was they worked really hard on the CVT to improve the sensation of driving behind that transmission, because I think it's important to their overall emissions and fuel economy goals. So I don't think that the CVT is going away in Nissan vehicles. And so they worked, I think, pretty hard to make it feel more satisfying. It does some simulations of gear changes and stuff when necessary. And I think it overall around town, it's very smooth. And so that, again, adds to some of the impression of refinement. There was a couple of things I missed. I really wanted a 110 volt outlet, actually. Because using it as a family car, we took it to football practice, and I wanted to sit in the back on the laptop and just, you go play your thing, get some energy out. I'm going to sit here and do some work. And it didn't have an outlet for a charger. So I thought that was actually kind of an oversight, because that tends to be one of the things that we find ourselves doing, is every charging port is generally populated, and then there's also something plugged into that 110 volt outlet. So I missed that a little bit. It didn't. I don't think it had a power hatch, which again, like these are niceties, and I had an SV, so I'm sure you can get it on different trims. It's been a few days since it left, and I don't have my exact notes in front of me, but it doesn't have a ton of personality, and I think that's where it sort of comes up short. Although I will say, the one vehicle I sort of completely forget about in this segment now is the Escape.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I would probably land on recommending the the Rogue before the Escape, because the Escape seems like I don't know. Do you think they like botched it or something? You haven't seen it or heard about it much. Almost like they're not that proud of it.
I think that they haven't talked about it too much, but it's actually selling really well. If you look at the sales figures, through the end of September, it's selling at a really good pace. So, I don't think I don't necessarily think they botched it. It's certainly finding an audience. So,
well, when was it new? It was new just at the end of
right at the end of 2019. Like production started in or sales started I think in November of last year.
Well, that explains quite a bit. They had maybe 3 or 4 months before everything completely changed.
Yep.
So that may have something to do with it. I liked the Escape when I drove it, but I don't think it's as efficient. I would have to have the numbers in front of me, but just off the top of my head, the Rogue felt roomier than the Escape. It's expensive too, where the Rogue I think is a better deal.
The Rogue is generally a pretty good value. There's a bunch of trim levels that are a pretty good price point, but when you start to get into that, the SV, which I think is the second from the top trim level, and the Platinum, now you're talking mid 30s price point. Platinum, upper 30s for the Platinum. And that's right in line with, where the rest of the market is. Oh, the other one that I forgot on the list that I often recommend is the Mazda CX-5, which is also in this class. But again, the CX-5 lacks a hybrid option. So for somebody that's looking for, something in this class with better fuel efficiency, there's really, at the moment, you've got the Escape and the RAV4. And then the Tucson is going to have a hybrid and plug-in hybrid variant as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things that I missed too, was the ability to have that hybrid option. I think that's actually really important for this class, and I'm surprised that not everybody's doing it. And Nissan, especially with their EV experience with the Leaf, you would think that they'd have some technology that they could easily port over and make a plug-in or hybrid Rogue.
Well, Nissan's had a strange relationship with hybrids. They've always been they've never been particularly committed to them. The first hybrid they did was the Altima back in 2007-8 timeframe, and they bought the drive units from Toyota. They used the Toyota hybrid system.
It was just not good.
Right. And then, then they did a hybrid on the Infiniti Q50, which I never drove one of those, but I never heard much great about them. And then, there was the Pathfinder, which was more mild hybrid-ish.
They did a hybrid Pathfinder?
Yeah, they did. And exactly. They didn't sell very many of them. And then they briefly did a Rogue hybrid as well on the previous generation Rogue, and that never got much attention either. So, they don't seem to have ever gotten really very excited about hybrids. But they did acknowledge, when we did at the media drive, we asked them about that, and they said, yeah, they're working on a hybrid. There's going to be a new hybrid version coming.
That's good. I mean, they really should be in this segment. I think people are really looking for it, and they're accepting it more and almost expecting it. To a certain degree. Yeah,
well, the thing is, in the past, there was always kind of a compromise with hybrids from a performance standpoint, and nowadays that's no longer the case. It's there's really, they're pretty natural feeling that for the most part, and so you're not really compromising much to get a hybrid in a vehicle like this. It just drives normally and gets really good fuel economy.
Yeah, well, especially since this already has a CVT.
Right.
So it's really not going to change its character at all.
Right.
This is a really solid upgrade. I think, like you said a few weeks ago, the interior, the thing I love about it is they're playing with materials a little bit. So it had, the one you drove have the cloth inserts like in the door panels? And
I drove the Platinum. So
okay, so
yeah, it had the leather.
So this has, like on the door panel, it's almost like where you'd have like wood or metal or plastic trim, it had like cloth that looked like it was from a suit. It was like a little pinstripe kind of pattern, and it's different. And it was enough that I paused for a minute and I looked at it. I was like, huh, I really like that. Like it looks good. And this had a couple colors. It had a little bit of a brown tone on the top of the dash and the top of the doors, and then the materials were definitely upgraded throughout the Rogue for this model. They decided to reinvent the shifter
again.
And it, in the SV trim at least, it has drive modes, which I liked quite a bit because I found that the standard drive mode is a little touchy. You get too much eagerness from it. It's almost like binary. There's no just like real gentle acceleration in normal mode. It's either sort of definitely accelerating or coasting, and you get sort of head bobbing that makes everybody carsick can happen there. So when you put it in eco mode, it backs off that response a bit, and it feels nicer, a little smoother. And it's still not like some eco modes that get terribly unresponsive.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad.
Well, as far as efficiency goes, just while you were talking, I pulled up on fueleconomy.gov, the Rogue, the Escape, the standard, the gas Escape, the 1.5 liter, and the gas RAV4 are all rated at 30 miles per gallon combined. So they all have almost the exact same fuel economy ratings. So there's no difference there. And then, when you go to the hybrids, now you're at 41 miles per gallon with the RAV and the Escape. They do a little better than the Honda hybrid does. And we'll see how I think the Tucson, the Hyundai Tucson will probably do comparable to that, probably get at least 40, given that, what their hybrid system does in some of their other vehicles.
Yeah. I think this is what people are buying now, and it's a great choice. This is the mainstream family car now. Yeah, and there's a lot of good here for that, and I think so as an SV. So it looks like the trims are S, SV, SL, and Platinum.
Okay, so I was thinking it was SL and then SV. Yeah. So yeah, so this is the SV. Then that's the volume trim. That's the highest volume one. That's the one most people are going to buy. And
it's very well equipped for that trim. The couple of things I missed seem like small potatoes, really, and you can get them. You go up to the SL and you can get larger wheels, the power liftgate that has the kick feature, this and leather as you climb the model ladder. So this one had, as an SV, stupid trim names. This one had just about everything you'd want. It had the Pro Pilot Assist. It had the intelligent, the around view monitor stuff, and it starts at 27. I think the one that I drove was like in the low 30s with a couple of options. So not a bad deal. Decent cargo room, pleasant to drive. Had all-wheel drive, which that bumps the price up. Front-wheel drive is 27 whatever, but you go with the whole-wheel drive, it adds to the price. It bumps you up $1,000, so $28,000. So yeah, as the volume model, they've done a really good job of giving it what people wanted. And the thing that you noted too was the touchscreen is better. It's much better.
Oh yeah,
it's not that antique Nissan system that was friendly but very limited. With a crappy screen, you got to hit like 5 times. Their system is good, and it does Android Auto and CarPlay pretty decently. So can't complain about that. I think if you're in the market, the Rogue, it's like it doesn't really live up to its name because it doesn't make any kind of mischief.
It's not really a Rogue, but
no, it's definitely a conformist. But it has some verve too. It's styled nicely. It's a little more square. Mm-hmm. Like once you get past the A-pillar, it's kind of it's chunky and square, but that pays off in interior volume and cargo space and just how usable it is. So,
right, and that's the other thing. Whereas the contrast between what Ford did, this time around versus what Toyota and Nissan did. Both the RAV4 and the Rogue, have that kind of squared off, chunkier design to them. And Ford, they bifurcated their compact crossover line, went softer, more car-like with the Escape, and then you've got the Bronco Sport, which has that more rugged off-road look to it because it's part of the Bronco family, and that they tried to rather than trying to make one vehicle to appeal across the board, they've covered the bases with two different variants of the same thing.
Yeah, well, and Ford, by doing that, I'm sure their hope is that they're ensuring a higher transaction price.
Oh yeah, and I suspect that the transaction prices on the Bronco Sport will be probably several $1,000s higher than on a typical Escape.
Yeah, well, and I think it's not cynical either. It's just, I guess it is a little cynical because it's a business decision, and most business decisions are. But people are going to want it, and they're going to be willing to pay for it. And I think that they like that kind of chunky Bronco design, and it doesn't, like Rebecca was saying too, like it's hard to tell exactly which one you're looking at for the sort of average consumer, right? Like people are just gonna see this square thing that says Bronco across the front, and it's a Bronco, not a Bronco Sport or the sort of full boat Bronco. It's just they're all gonna be Broncos,
right?
So
that's exactly the point.
Yeah. So I jumped out of the Rogue and I jumped into a Chevy Bolt, and this is my first experience with the Bolt. It's a Bolt Premier. This is a really, really good car. This is possibly the best GM car I've driven in a very long time. It's really well thought out, really well screwed together. No complaints about range. Although I've been charging it on a 110 volt outlet, so it took quite a while to put some juice back in it. But yeah, man, this is a good car. Why is Chevy not trying to sell as many of them as they possibly can?
I have no idea why they aren't marketing the hell out of this thing. Well, I do, because I think even if they really tried, I'm not sure how many they could. It's a subcompact car. It's a small car, a small hatchback.
It doesn't feel that small.
No, it's actually surprisingly roomy. I mean, it's very well packaged, but it's still a car as opposed to a crossover. When they launched it, they tried to call this a crossover, and then it's a tall hatchback.
I think that's what they call it now, is a tall wagon.
Yeah, but it's a car, and there's nothing wrong with that except that no Americans want to buy them. No, they don't want to buy small cars. That's why they're building the Bolt EUV, which is a little bit taller, still a little bit longer. But it's just
if it looks like a Bolt, though, that's going to be they need this powertrain in an Equinox or even a Traverse. Like I know those are much larger, heavier vehicles, but that's what people are buying. Like having a standalone model seems like almost an archaic convention that's going to sort of go away to a certain degree. Like, why can't you just put the EV stuff in the mainstream car?
Well, and that's what's coming. There is a Chevy crossover, in that kind of Equinox, somewhere between Equinox and Blazer size class.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So that's coming sometime in the next couple of years. They showed us that back at the EV Day back in March, which I think was about 16 years ago. But it's on its way. So they're not going to put the EV stuff into the existing conventional design vehicles. They're not going to do any more conversions. All the EVs going forward are going to be purpose built, as EVs, and it may well be it may well end up being a replacement for either the Equinox or the Blazer, or it might be, at least for a time, overlapping with one or both of those cars.
Yeah, as soon as they said it, I realized like part of the reason why they make EVs standalone is because people like having the image. I think that's one of the things that sells them to a degree.
That, and taking an existing architecture, existing vehicle architecture, and trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to stuff this battery in here? It always ends up being compromised. You end up with something like what the as good as the Volt was in many respects, it was a compromise because it was designed around an existing, Chevy Cruze architecture, even though it had a different body on it. The Ford Focus Electric, same thing. They took the Focus and they tried to stuff lithium-ion cells anywhere they could, and you ended up with a car with no cargo space, and not much room inside, and not nearly enough range. So rather than trying to compromise and stuff batteries into an existing conventional vehicle platform, they're just designing them around this, flat battery pack from the ground up.
Yeah, well, whatever they did to design the Bolt, it's a really fully realized electric car, and I love that it's so well thought out and so well done. It gives me hope that once they finally start offering it in segments that people buy, they will sell them.
There is one other flaw to the Bolt, though.
Oh, okay. Well, hang on. Let me go through the high points anyway. All right. So for 2020, they boosted the range. So it's up to 259 miles on a full charge. So that's good. Then I'm driving the Premier, so it has the leather heated seats and the heated steering wheel and all kinds of stuff to actually reduce your range.
Well, actually, when you're driving it in cold weather, that kind of stuff will improve your range because that'll give you comfort without having to use the heating and ventilation system as much.
Oh, that's true.
Because
HVAC,
because it's much more efficient to heat your body directly. Heat the parts of your body that's in direct contact rather than trying to heat all of the air inside the cabin. So,
that's true.
You can be comfortable. You can set your cabin temperature at, say 60 or 65 degrees, turn on the seat heaters and the steering wheel and still be comfortable, when it's, 15 or 20 degrees outside. And it's going to take a lot less energy from the battery to do that than it will to just if you set the temperature at 70 degrees.
Well, one of the things I wanted to try, which I couldn't figure out, was how to maybe get it to condition the interior while it was still on shore power. And I don't know whether that was because they need the app to do it, because they have an app for the Bolt that will allow keyless entry and starting and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think you need to do that through the app. So you have to install the app on your phone and then pair it to the car.
So that's me being a lazy journalist. So I'll play with that while it's here for a few more days. I'll see what I get. They've upgraded the cameras on it, so the surround vision and rear view cameras now are high def, and yeah, they work. But the thing is so small and it has such good visibility, you don't really need the cameras. And it's torquey. The performance is really good. I've actually gotten lots and lots of complaints out of the tires. when you go into a corner and you accelerate, and the thing just gives it all. It's like 270 pound-feet, 266 pound-feet of torque. So it doesn't really have any problem lighting up the tires. But sometimes when you don't intend to. And you guys actually helped me figure out the one pedal driving. So I'm pleased that it can do one pedal, because they call it low mode. And so it's not obvious that you drive along in low mode and that's actually, it just regens harder. But it also has a paddle on the left side of the left steering wheel spoke that will allow you to regen on demand. So whatever you're doing, no matter what drive mode you're in, you can just hold that paddle down and it'll regen. It'll regen all the way to a stop. So that's nice. It extends your range that way. I didn't like the infotainment. It seemed a little difficult to figure out. So I got to play with that more. I think once you get used to it, it's all right. But it took me a little bit of just staring at it, going, wait, what function is it that I want? How do I get to it? So that's, our constant complaint. But yeah, I mean, it actually charged up pretty quickly. I had it down to, I think I had about 80 or 75 miles left, and just left it plugged in overnight, and it added another 50 or 60 miles to it. So yesterday when I jumped in, it had, actually, no, it added more than that. Because if I had like 75 left, I jumped in yesterday afternoon and it had like 150 of range, and then I left it plugged in overnight, and it's almost full. So it's not terrible on a 110 volt outlet. The plug gets a little warm.
Yeah.
But you can, the thing that I thought was cool is you can select whether it draws 8 or 12 amps too off your circuit. So depending on what else you've got, if you've got it in your garage on a 110 outlet that also runs your deep freeze or something, you may not have enough. If that's a 15 amp breaker, you may not have enough to charge the car at 12 amps and handle the sort of the surge of the refrigerator compressor. So it's well thought out that way, and that's I think the overall feeling I get from the Bolt is they really built a solid EV. It's well built. Nothing falls off in the rain. It works really well. It's
you mean the rear bumper's still on there?
Still on there. It's got good space inside, good foot room because the floor is flat, so it has a lot of space there. Good cargo room in the back, so it's well packaged, like you said, and it is. It's just it's a great car. I wish that they talked about it more, because I think that you're letting the boutique brands suck up all the air in the room, and you, General Motors, Chevrolet, make a really good EV, and it's built to a high standard. And you should talk about it more, unless you don't want to sell any, and that may be the case. But I don't think this is a compliance car. I think this is a legitimate attempt at really sorting out the issues behind transitioning from internal combustion, which they do really well, to full EV, which they it's not like they don't have experience at it. It's just trying to find the right blend of a hardware and vehicle to put it in and all of that stuff. So I liked the experience. I think in a different segment, it really has a lot of potential.
Yeah, no, I agree. Getting back to the one flaw in the ointment,
I was going to say, what's the one flaw? Don't let me forget.
The price tag.
Well, it's not that ridiculous. It's like $37,000.
$37,500. Or the Premier starts at $41,900, so $42,000, which most people, they're going to look at this and say, okay, it's a really nice compact hatchback, but $42,000, come on. And the problem is GM has sold more than 200,000 plugins now, so they are no longer eligible for the federal tax credit. So what that MSRP is minus whatever deal you can swing with the dealer. Well, no, I mean, now that MSRP, that's the price, unless you can negotiate down with your local dealer. And in some cases, some states, still have some incentives on there, but it's pretty expensive for what it is.
Well, yes and no. I think if you're looking at this, I think that dealers are probably going to offer you an attractive lease. Mm-hmm. So that may take some of the sting out of it. And also, like, if you're buying an EV, one of the things you're going to benefit from is it's a little more expensive. Great. Like, they offer ridiculous loans right now.
Yeah.
So you could take advantage of that. You can also take advantage of the fact that there's not an engine in there. There's not a transmission so much. So probably in terms of maintenance, there's less to break, would be my assumption. You're still going to have to fix the things like, shocks, struts, ball joints, brakes, all the stuff that wears, but you're going to get out of having to do, the timing belt service and, a water pump and gosh, the intake gasket leaks and stuff. Like, I'm trying to think of all the things that, maintenance wise, you still have to attend to no matter, how good the engine is in any car. It gets used, that stuff runs, and so it needs to be maintained. You don't really have that with an EV. It's just the motor just goes. And I think the only real thing I've heard of that's kind of EV specific is like, sometimes the batteries, like the bus bars and stuff, corrode, and you need to clean that up. And I can't imagine
the battery's got an 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty on it, so I wouldn't worry too much about the battery. But for comparison, this thing is comparable in size to a Chevy Sonic. If you can still find a Sonic.
Like, even the so the Model 3 is significantly larger. So this is like 90 cubic feet in interior volume, and the Model 3 is like 113, something like that. So
that's including the cargo space, though, I think. If you're looking at passenger volume, I think they're actually surprisingly similar.
Because that's what I was trying to.
Because this is a lot taller than a Model 3.
Right, and so okay, so the total interior volume of a Model 3 is 112. So then you take 15 cubic feet off of that. Yeah, so that's like actually less.
Yeah, so this, it's 94 cubic feet for passenger volume, 17 for cargo volume. So
that's more than a Model 3.
That's 111 cubic feet total.
Okay, so that's actually one less than a Model 3.
Yeah.
Model 3 is 15 cubic feet of cargo volume, so you take that away, and you're...
Plus, in this, as a hatchback, you can fold down those rear seats, and you can open that up, and you're close to 50 cubic feet of cargo space if you need it.
So it's a perception gap.
Yes, it's all about perception. But, getting back to the price, for comparison, a Chevy Sonic starts at $17,600. So it's $20,000 cheaper.
But what does the Model 3 start at?
Well, the Model 3 nominally starts somewhere around $37,000.
Right. No, and they don't make one.
It's really hard to find one at that price point. I mean, most of them are somewhere in the $40,000 price range. But if you're comparing, a similar type of car, people are more likely to cross shop this against a Sonic or a Nissan Versa or a Honda Fit than they are against a Model 3.
Well, if you're doing that, then clearly the Bolt is going to lose. It's just expensive.
Yeah. Well, that's my point. In the class of car this is in, it's very expensive compared to a Model 3 that has similar interior volume. Model 3 is obviously quicker, but it's got comparable range. Base Model 3 is about 260 miles of range. This is 259 miles of range. And actually, you can, if you use the low mode all the time and you're mostly driving around town, you can actually get well over 300 miles easily. Even before they did the mid-cycle update last year, the original version of it, I was able to get almost 300 miles out of a charge on that thing, driving in low mode. Yeah. So, in terms of range and its actual functionality, it is very comparable to a Model 3, but almost nobody's going to cross shop this against a Model 3.
But see, I think so, and I don't disagree. I think they should, because, and I think this is maybe what GM is doing, where they're saying, well, no, this isn't a B segment or C segment car. This is an EV, and so no matter what segment its form factor says it is, its powertrain dictates that it's an EV. So they're saying, in terms of EVs, it's comparable to this model that has the sort of the zeitgeist of the EV market. The Model 3. When you think EV, you think Tesla. They've been very successful at that. And I don't know how to close that. Oh,
you're the advertising guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, they should pay me for it, and I'll think about it. But I think that's what's going on is yes, it presents as a small hatchback. GM would do better getting you to think about it as a Model 3 competitor. And that's where it shines. It's built really well. The dealers are everywhere. You're not limited to a single charging network, a really good charging network, but a single charging network. This thing can charge on anything. And I think it does DC fast charging too.
It does, but only at 50 kilowatts.
Yeah, so you got about a half hour to put about half the range back in, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so that's not terrible though. But it's because it's that small hatchback, it's much more useful than a car with a trunk that's kind of tight. Model 3 is like 3 Series size. Even the Model S is not that big on the inside. So this is a much more useful day-to-day EV, but it's not as cool.
Yeah, well, and that's the problem is you need that cool factor right now, which is why, they're building the Hummer.
Which is fine, like great. I don't have a problem with that. Like people are going to buy big trucks like that anyway, regardless. So yeah, make one an EV, and it's a cool looking thing. So I wish that they could sort of work on that sort of perception, because this is a really good car, and I want more cars like this. And I think that this is an EV that I would part with the $37,000 for it. Because it's good. It's just well thought out. It's well built. It's really more car than I need, and so that's generally all good things. And I would feel really confident buying one versus the things that float out there anecdotally about the ownership experience of some other EV brands that are more boutique. And I'm not just picking on Tesla, but other brands too. Like you start to get into boutique automakers, you get boutique automaker problems. So back with the volume automaker, they have all that stuff is figured out, and that means a lot to me. I would consider leasing it. And I think that's really where it's going to shine for its first few years, and that's probably where it has shined is being leased for. It's been out since 2017.
Yeah, it came out as a 17 model in 16.
Yeah.
And, for what it's worth, you can get, I just looked up on KBB.com. They list the fair market value for a used 2018 Bolt as $21,000 to $24,000 for the Bolt Premier.
That's a really good deal.
Yeah. So, if you can't, if you want a really good EV, but you can't manage, $40,000 for one, think about, consider a 2-year-old, 2 or 3-year-old one. You've got, only slightly less range. It was still 240 miles of range, for, $23,000, that, is probably going to be relatively low mileage. That's going to be, probably about, they say, okay, so this is, here's one. Yeah, they've got one that they list at $20,559 with 32,000 miles on it. That's a low. I mean, that's practically new.
Yeah.
So if you want one of these, you really should consider one. Even a used one, because they're not that old, and it's a fantastic car.
Yeah, well, and was it Jalopnik that went through and said they had a piece a few weeks ago, that basically said like Chevy dealers are offering ridiculous deals on new Bolts.
Yeah,
like, you can get a new Bolt down to like 20 with all the incentives and stuff, or in the 20s.
So shop around. Don't pay sticker price.
We just made the case for it.
Yeah.
Don't buy the fancy thing. Buy the Bolt.
Okay.
Because get other fancy stuff in your life. It leaves more room. You can
the Bolt is big enough to carry the fancy stuff in the back.
Right, exactly. I love that actually, that it's a hatch, because small sedans.
Small sedans suck.
I spent too many years with small sedans and small children, and the problem with small sedans and small children is that the equipment for said small children is large.
Yes.
And it does not fit in the trunk of the small sedan. Yeah, so it's a great EV. So good for GM for making it. Please try to sell more of them. I'd love to see a Blazer with this powertrain. I think that would be great. It'd be killer.
Well, it's actually going to be the next generation powertrain and batteries, so it'll be even better. Yeah.
So ringing endorsement for the Bolt, at least from my side. And I don't even have a charger. I'm like Rebecca, where it's like I'm a loser running a power cord across the backyard and in the rain. Like, yeah, whatever, it's grounded. It's fine. The dog will let me know if the
It's
grass
plugged
is
into a
energized.
GFCI outlet, so you're good.
Yeah, but actually, it's not.
Oh, okay, never mind.
I
Mine
have
is.
an old house. Yeah, no, we've got like knob and tubing and stuff in this house. It's great.
I got
so, yeah.
GFCIs here, so.
We have some, but not all. Whatever.
All right.
Next house is gonna be like star grounded and just be yeah. Anyway, so that's it. That's my garage.
All right. Thanks, Dan. And now we're going to head back to Rebecca, and Rebecca and I are going to discuss a couple of news items. Over the past week and a half, you and I have both driven a new product that is going to be hitting dealerships in the next couple of weeks. The first ones are hitting the ports now, and they should be arriving at some dealerships in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And that's the Genesis GV80. You drove it last week in New York, in the New York area, and I drove one this week here in the Detroit area.
I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, tell us what you thought first. I mean,
why should I?
Okay, well, I mean, the two of us, I think you actually saw it in person before I did last year.
Yes, I did.
Before a few weeks ahead of the LA Auto Show last November. The two of us sat in the GV80 on the floor at the LA Auto Show. I remember one of the things that we commented on was, a lot of the finishing on the interior, the knurling on the controls, on the shift or on the media controller and on the knobs and everything else, had a really interesting texture to it. It wasn't like a traditional knurling where you have that kind of diamond pattern. It was a different kind of texture to it. And then, the materials, the open pore woods and the leather and everything, it really felt high end, really felt premium, and looked it too, so it looked and felt the part. And so, I got a chance to drive a couple of them this week, both of them with the V6 engine. So
So you didn't drive the 4-cylinder?
I didn't get a chance to jump in one of the 4 cylinders.
Okay.
But so they offer it with a 2.5 liter turbo 4-cylinder, which has about 300 horsepower, and then the twin turbo V6, which is closer to 400 horsepower.
With 3.5 liter.
Yeah, it's a 3.5 liter, and of course, being part of the Hyundai Motor Group, these engines are, share their architecture with other engines within the Hyundai, Kia, Genesis family. So, both of these, are, part of the Smart Stream family that have dual port and direct injection for better drivability and emissions and everything. So this version, the 2.5 in here, is a little bit higher output than what you'll find in a Hyundai. The Hyundais, I think, are about 270, 275 horsepower from their 2.5 turbos. This is a little over 300 in the 4-cylinder and more in the V6. And there's a lot of really nice features in here. I mean, the whole thing felt really well executed. The shape of the thing is great, and it's unfortunate that this car wasn't available when the Genesis brand launched as a standalone brand a few years ago. Because I think we've been fans of Genesis for a long time, especially the G80 and the G70 and to in a different way the G90, but sedans have been on the decline, and not having a crossover in the lineup, I think, has really hurt Genesis trying to establish itself as a standalone brand apart from Hyundai. And I think they did an amazing job on this thing. And what's interesting about this, this overall size, is comparable to Lincoln Aviator and BMW X5 and forget what the other ones they talked about, the Audi Q7, but most versions of the GV80 are 2-row only. You can get it with a 3rd row, with an optional 3rd row in one of the high-end trims, but for the most part, it's really meant as a 2-row, which means that it's actually got lots of room in there. So it's very spacious inside, and this is a new rear-wheel drive longitudinal engine architecture that they share with the new G80, which I'll be driving in a couple of weeks, and it's exclusive to the Genesis brand. So this is not being shared with Hyundai and Kia at all,
which is really smart to do.
Yeah. I mean, they're obviously sharing powertrains and a lot of other hardware, but the platform itself is unique. And so really you can think of this as kind of a G80 wagon that sits up a little bit higher, than a G80 sedan would. And I think it works really well. The driving dynamics were outstanding, good steering feel, great ride quality, great performance. From a functional standpoint, one thing that did annoy me a bit was that center controller, the way they executed that. Because unlike most center controllers, which I generally like, for the media controller, this one, instead of sitting up and above, being like a knob, is more like if you think back to the old school original Apple iPods. It's flush mounted, and you put your finger on the knurled perimeter of it to turn it, and then you can also toggle it, to up, down, left, right, to select stuff or to move up and down in the interface. And it's a non-touchscreen interface, so the 14-inch display sits up on the dash, up away from your reach, so you only interface with it either by voice or through
like
that controller.
You like that?
I don't think this controller was executed as well as it should be. Because and let me explain what I told to the guys at Genesis. I think while that knurling that I described earlier looks really good and generally feels really good, I think that I don't get enough traction on it with my finger when I'm rotating it, and because it also acts as a toggle, to go left, right, up, down in the interface. I ended up finding myself having to press down a little bit harder on it. There's enough resistance in it to rotation that I had to press down enough that oftentimes, a number of times I found myself actually toggling it at the same time I was trying to rotate it. And I think that, that diamond pattern knurling, I think where you get a little more traction with your finger, it would actually have been more effective there. So, aside from that, the rest of it was fine. And, I think it's just a matter of getting used to it and finding the right balance of pressure on there so you get the traction with your finger so it rotates, without toggling it.
Yeah, I think that I had some of the same issues with it. It's concave in design, but it was
the center part is it's kind of
right.
dished
The center
out
part's concave, but it was not intuitive enough. And actually, a lot of the feedback that I provided and others in my group provided was that the infotainment system really was super confusing. It was not intuitive. The voice control was good, but trying to use that the controller was really tough. I didn't like the fact that the gear selector was a rotary knob as well. So you had
and that one is one that actually sticks up.
Right. So the rotary knob, the gear selector sticks up, and then this multimedia controller is in front of it. So you kind of rest your palm on the gear selector and then touching the controller. I found myself often reaching for the gear selector by mistake because they're right next to each other. I mean, they're in parallel to each other. And so I found the positioning to not be as easy to get to know. And keep in mind too, that, we're handed these cars. I was handed this car in Lower Manhattan, and then told, here, go to this location. So we're sort of learning all this on the fly. Ideally, if you purchase this, you sit down and spend some time with it, but you do want that initial interaction to be intuitive. And as listeners know, if you need technology broken, I am your girl. I will do that for you. And so it was comforting and validating to hear other people have similar issues with the multimedia. That being said, I did get a chance to drive that 4-cylinder. That's actually what I drove first. I drove it up about 85 miles outside of the city. And it was really, really good. I didn't really understand this route plan because they had us in terrible traffic, which there still is terrible traffic in the New York area, going through, I think we went through the Holland Tunnel over to New Jersey, and it was just, it was a mess. It was a mess. But the acceleration was there when I needed it. And this is a 2.5 liter, 4-cylinder, 300 horsepower. And that thing was more than happy to take me where I needed to go. I mean, it was really, really good. I drove the 3.5 liter V6 back. That has 375 horsepower. It's a nice to have, but
not necessary.
It's not necessary. I mean, sure, it's fun. It's great. But man, that 4-cylinder, they did some really good tuning on that. I thought that was really, really good. I love the way this thing looks. It's just gorgeous. And I will say that as I was weaving my way through Manhattan, at every traffic light, people were stopping to look at it in Manhattan.
Yeah. It definitely stands out. It's not a copycat of all the other, premium crossovers.
And it's very elegant. It's beautiful to look at. And so, obviously we've all driven cars that people turn around and look at, but sometimes it's not very good. It's not for the right reasons. Yeah. This, I think, is just, the proportions of it are beautiful. The interior, as you mentioned, the interior materials are just gorgeous on it. The only thing, and people commented on this when I posted on my Instagram, the steering wheel is very old school. It's got this big fat middle, and the spokes on it are really large. It's a 2-spoke wheel. It's a 2-spoke wheel. And some people were commenting, about a bad 80s steering wheel, and I could kind of see that. So I think that was probably on the flip side, though, it also has a nice thick rim, and so I found that holding it, even though you've got these two fairly wide spokes, my fingers wrapped around it. They were kind of cut out a little bit in the back. You can, even if you're holding it at 9 and 3 where the spokes are, it's still very comfortable to hold. It actually feels really good in your hand. It looks a little unusual, but it definitely feels good in your hand. It does. I did notice that it was different, though. But no, you're right. It does. It feels really good. And again, it's beautiful. There's an incredible amount of refinement in it. Really, really quiet. It's funny because I drove the Q7 down to the city to go and drive this thing then. So I went from, what would potentially be a competitor. The Q7's bigger, but it's driving that and kind of missing that really emotional connection. And then getting into the GV80, it just was lovely. It was a really, really, really good experience. I really liked it. I was really happy with it. And I think that, if you're in this market for ideally that 5-seater, I think this is great. And keep in mind too, on a global basis, if you think about the usage that this would get in Korea and other Asian markets, it's really, a vehicle that you're going to tout executives around in. And so they're going to be in that second row, and that second row has so much room. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense. I understand why they want to offer a 7-seat, but I would say that you'd almost be better off spending money on like the Kia Telluride or the Hyundai Palisade if you need a 7-row SUV. I think that this Genesis GV80 really shines with that 5-seat configuration and with a lot of flexibility in terms of cargo and passenger room. On the topic of interface, did you get a chance to try one of I think it's the top end trim level with the 3D instrument cluster? Yes. What did you think of it? So I thought it was pretty cool. I'm running through my pictures real quick to just, I thought it was pretty cool. Why? Did you have issues with it? No. I was just curious, your impression of it. So what this is, it's a full digital cluster, so there's no mechanical gauges there. The standard cluster has a regular analog gauge on the left and then an 8-inch digital display on the right. This optional one is all digital, but it's
it's a sort of a multi-plane display, and there's actually an IR sensor similar to what's used for the driver monitor systems on some of the GM Super Cruise and so on, that is looking at your face to look where your eyes are and where you're looking. And if you shift around, what it actually does, it's using the parallax of where your eyes are, where they're looking, to adjust the planes of this, so it actually looks three-dimensional. So it looks like it's got some depth to it.
Right.
It's I'm not sure how useful it actually is. It's kind of neat to look at. I mean, and the interface is very attractive. It's a really nice design. Most of the time, you're hopefully going to be sitting relatively stationary right in front of it, looking at it. So you're not hopefully shifting back and forth too much while you're driving. But even then, it does appear to have some depth to it, which it's one of those things that kind of maybe makes you feel a little happy. It's less, it's because it feels more physical. It's not
right.
It's not that more, I'd say, more sterile, flat right. surface.
It's much more interactive.
Yes.
So what's interesting about that eye tracking movement, there's actually a company that I've know of here in the New York area that has installed that on retro installed it on vehicles. What's really interesting about that is it's ideal for things like drowsy driving and getting a more accurate read on how people are driving, whether they are distracted, following their eye movements. This system that these people have developed, it actually can even monitor your temperature, and it can indicate whether you have COVID or not, which is crazy. But a little Big Brother-ish, but at the same time, an interesting idea.
If you're using IR cameras, IR sensors for that, you'll be able to tell the temperature gradient of your face.
Right, and blood pressure, and, of course, if, God forbid something happens to you while you're driving, like a stroke or a heart attack or something. So there's all sorts of uses for this technology that I think is really, really interesting. And I thought, you're right. I mean, it's again, it's that connection, right? It's that feeling of that the vehicle is a partner to you and interacting with you, and the infotainment system and multimedia is there to make your driving experience better. And I think a lot of times that's not always the case. But this, I think, it does help you. It gives good feedback. It was, there was aspects of it that I think once they smooth out the interface, I think it'll be really, really good. It just that the controller, I think, was an obstacle to what is otherwise a pretty good system overall. I think, too, there were some things that were buried a little bit that I wanted a little bit more clear. But, overall, I think it was good. It's just there's opportunities for improvement there.
Yeah, and I think it's an excellent vehicle, and like I said, I'll have the G80 in a couple of weeks, which it has basically the same type of interior. It's got the same sort of interface, and so I'll have
the controller's different though on it. Is it different?
No, I think it's the same.
Okay. That'll be interesting to see.
We'll see if the texturing might be different, but it's the same basic design. Once I've had time to spend more time with it, spend a few days with it, we'll see if that feel of it improves a little bit.
What my issue really was, what I kept wanting to push when I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I know exactly what you mean. That's what I really took away from it was I needed to, at the times when I wanted to just say, okay, yes, this is what I want, and kind of press enter, if you will, it didn't do it. So then I was like, okay, where am I supposed to press then? And so again, it was really focused around, I think, the controller. And then I do think some of the menus were confusing and how you accessed items within the menu. The look itself,
it has this sideways tablet look, and it is kind of, it's not integrated into the dash. It is kind of set above the dash, but not in it didn't compromise visibility or anything like that. But
yeah,
I think that
it's not terribly tall.
right.
It's very much a very widescreen display.
Right, exactly. So, again, it's certainly not a reason not to purchase, but I do hope that they take some feedback and maybe simplify some of the interactions with the multimedia. But otherwise, I think it's just a stunningly beautiful vehicle.
Yeah. One other thing I want to touch on this vehicle was some of the improvements they made in the driver assist systems. So This has a second generation of Hyundai's highway driving assist, which is not quite a level 2 system, sort of a semi, maybe level 1.5 system. So it tries to do lane centering. But one of the big things they changed this year that they enhanced this year, is they added 2 front corner radar sensors. So we've had the rear corner radar sensors for the blind spot monitoring. They added 2 more in the front corners, and that enables a bunch of different things. One of the big things is detecting cut-ins. So if you're using adaptive cruise control, you're driving down the highway, somebody starts to pull over into your lane, those short-range corner radars can pick up somebody pulling over, and it'll back off and make sure that there's enough room there.
It interacts more like a peripheral vision.
Yes, exactly. And another thing that it does is as you're driving down the highway, if you're passing a wide vehicle like a semi, normally it will try and stay pretty much in the center of the lane. Mm-hmm. But when you're passing a wide vehicle or a vehicle that's too close over to your lane, then it will kind of edge over in your lane. Still staying in the lane, but it'll edge over to give a little more room, so you're not running too close to that vehicle that's beside you, and then resume again. Also, using the map information as an input. So when there's curves in the road, if it determines that your speed is maybe a little bit too high for that curve, it'll automatically back off a little bit and then resume as you exit the curve. Sorts of things. Mercedes has been doing that for a while. GM does that in Super Cruise. There's others that are doing that. So those are all really good features. And then other things that they're doing with those corner radars is the enhancing the forward collision assist. So if you're making a left turn and there's a car coming towards you in the opposite direction, it can use that to enhance the automatic emergency braking. If there's a potential for a collision, or when you're crossing a junction, or if you're driving down a 2-lane road and somebody coming the opposite direction and you're a little bit too close to that center line, it'll automatically kind of edge you back over in the other direction. So a lot of really nice added capabilities that are very subtle. They're not going to jump out at you, but they're there to help, to be helpful. And I think those are really good things, by having those extra sensors in there.
They are, for sure. And, there's also a couple things that they pointed out besides the 3D cluster, which is actually a world's first, the smart cruise control with machine learning, which is really cool. So it learns how you drive. And we asked them, how long does that take? And it actually is very quick. Like it will start to learn. Like one of the things that I find with cruise control is adaptive cruise control specifically, is that there's the drivers that are in the New York area, and this probably is everywhere, but they're very aggressive, and they do kind of, they dart in and cut you off. And I rarely get the opportunity to use cruise control in any kind of traffic situation because the car doesn't respond to the environment. And with this smart cruise with machine learning, it will start to adapt. So they say. The other thing, too, that this has is road active noise canceling, which is a world's first.
That's an interesting feature.
This is one of the reasons why it was so quiet without being without having that feeling of you're in a bubble, like a puffy bubble. You could still hear, obviously, but it was a really, really nice quiet ride.
Yeah, so the way this works, when if you've driven down a rough road, road where the pavement's kind of broken, you'll hear, inputs from the road coming up, through the tires, through the suspension into the cabin. And what this is doing, traditional adaptive noise control or active noise control is just using microphones in the cabin to measure some of the ambient sound, especially from the engine. So looking for those boomy, unpleasant frequencies that people don't like to hear. And then it's using the audio system to generate opposing sound waves that cancel out those unpleasant frequencies. What this new system is doing is it actually, in addition to the microphones, they added accelerometers on the four corners on the suspension to measure the inputs from the road, so that when you hit a frost heave or something, those sharp inputs that causes the wheel to move in a certain way that would characteristically create certain kinds of sounds in the cabin. They use that information, feed that in, and also generate opposing sound waves to cancel out those sound waves. So it's not making a completely silent environment, but it's creating a very comfortable, refined, serene environment. So it's very, very quiet and relaxed in there, but you can still, if there's an ambulance coming up behind your emergency vehicle, you're going to hear that. You're going to hear somebody's horn honking, things like that. But the things that you don't want to hear just kind of magically fade away into the background. It's really impressive. It worked really, really well.
I always like bringing up something and then letting you explain it.
Well, it's funny, I was, after I drove it, I was talking to the Genesis guys, and I said, first thing I told them was, this is the vehicle that the folks at Cadillac should be benchmarking immediately. They should get their hands on one of these and benchmark it for NVH.
No, you're right.
Because it's so good in so many ways. And especially in ways that we've complained about for Cadillac, the NVH being one of their challenges.
No, you're absolutely right. You're 100% right, Sam, because it is something that we bring up a lot, because luxury, quietness is part of the luxury experience. Even and think about it, like even with consumer goods or buying a house, one of the things that you pay extra for is quietness. That's why, houses near a highway or near the airport don't have as much value, because it's noisy. And so when you get into a vehicle that you've spent a good amount of money on, you want that quiet experience. And speaking of money, I thought the price points on this were really, really good as well. So the one that I drove both of them, the 2.5 liter all-wheel drive starts at $48,900, which is crazy.
That's the rear drive.
That's rear-wheel drive.
Yeah.
The one that I drove was all-wheel drive, fully loaded, for $63,800, destinations $1,000 and $1,025. So $64,800 for a vehicle that is absolutely jam-packed. I mean, that is just, those kinds of numbers are really, really stunning, I think.
Yeah, and even the fully loaded, the 3.5 only comes with all-wheel drive, so there's no rear-wheel drive V6.
Right.
The Prestige, the 3.5T all-wheel drive Prestige, is $71,000 before the delivery charge.
And you don't even need that one.
Yeah, it's a great value. I mean, if you want that cool 3D cluster, you have to go for that one.
Okay, you're right, because that was on the way back.
Yeah, but
okay.
even the advanced, and if you want the third row seat, you have to get the Advanced Plus, which is $65. But the Advanced at $64,350, has most of what you want in there, including that Lexicon premium audio system.
I mean, that is just,
and the heads-up display.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. This segment is really crowded with competitors. There's a lot to choose from here, and I just think that while Genesis is late to the party, they do have a really, really nice dress on.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of being late to the party, the GMC Hummer EV was revealed in full this past week to the world. The two of us saw it back in March at one of the last events we went to, the GM EV Day. We saw it there, but it was shown to the world during the World Series game on Tuesday night, I think. And then Wednesday morning, they did some media briefings where we got a little more detail on a bunch of stuff. At launch, there launching with just one version, the Edition 1, which has all the goodies in there. And for the first year, that's the only one that's going to be available. What they're not saying is how many of them are going to be available, although they are sold out. So the Edition 1, which is the first year model, they've got reservations for all of those now. So if you want one now, you're going to have to wait till 2022. This is coming out about a year from now, a little less than a year from now. The Edition 1, 1,000 horsepower, 3 motors, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, $112,000.
Well, you forgot the crab walk.
Oh, and crab walk, yes. So, it's interesting. I was talking to Peter Valdez de Pena from CNN later that day on Wednesday after the briefing, and a lot of the features that are in here, things like the air spring suspension, the crab walk, are actually technologies that have been around for a while. They're not necessarily new technologies, but they're using them in new ways. Like the crab walk, GM offered 4-wheel steering or quadra-steer system on their full-size pickups in the early 2000s.
Oh gosh, I remember that.
From about 2003 to 2005, and they discontinued it because nobody bought it. But it was actually a really cool idea because when you got a big full-size pickup truck, those things are a pain in the ass to maneuver.
And I would think that there's got to be military vehicles that do this as well, right?
Oh yeah, and I mean there's
It's not like it's new technology.
There's been the first all-wheel drive systems came out in the early 90s, or all-wheel steering systems, I mean. Honda had one on the Prelude, a mechanical system on the Prelude, starting around 90 or 91. And there were various vehicles that have had it over time, including the Cadillac CT6 offered an all-wheel steering system. And typically the way these work is at low speeds, they do counter steering. So the front and rear wheels steer in opposite directions. So that gives you better maneuverability, really tight turning circle. And I guess in the case of the Hummer, it's going to have like a 37-foot turning circle, which for a big truck like this is very impressive. And then what they do generally is at higher speeds, at highway speeds, is the wheels steer in phase. They steer in the same direction so that when you're changing lanes, it gives you extra stability. So you can change lanes without the vehicle. The vehicle can move over, kind of doing that crabbing at high speeds. What they're doing on the Hummer is they're adding this extra mode, the crab walk mode, to do that in-phase steering at low speeds. So when you're going through a tight trail, you can enable crab walk and turn all the wheels in one direction and kind of move diagonally, to get around a boulder or something like that. And, that's a cool feature. Nothing wrong with that. I think, for a vehicle's designed for off-road driving, I think that's a great extra mode. And considering this stuff is all electronically controlled, it's all you're just adding a few extra lines of software for this mode. So it's not a big deal. And the air spring suspension can raise and lower it by 6 inches. But overall, what do you think of this vehicle?
I think this thing's a riot. And the reason that I think it's a riot is because the buyer that has $112,000 to spend on a car like this wants all these toys. You have to go back to who this is buying, who this is for. It is not for the everyman, as Dan would say. This is for innovators and early adopters. There's only a one
innovators.
That's the beginning of the technology adoption curve. It doesn't actually start with early adopters. It starts with innovators. So that's like the 1%. And then as you start to move into early adopters, then they get into like the 2 to 3% part of, and so when you look at the technology adoption curves, this is for those very, very early adopters, very early. And so they want all this stuff. They want the more bells and whistles and crazy things that this thing does, the more they will like it. And that's why they plunked down $112,000 to be the first. So it has to be different. This isn't, if you want a typical electric vehicle, there's other options. This is not it. So I think it's a riot. I mean, my friends, Emmy Hall, she just competed in this Rebelle rally, and they had the Rivian, and they competed with the electric truck, in the electrified class of the Rebelle. And I look at this thing and I think I want to drive that in the Rebelle next year. But I think that, this is the right type of, if you're going to put out a Hummer EV, this is what you put out.
To me, I look at this thing and the more I think about it, this is for those guys that, are feeling insecure about themselves.
It's not.
It is. That's what Hummers have always been.
Yeah, but this is more than that.
No. I mean, how is it more than that?
Because it's an electric vehicle.
So what?
What does that have to do with being insecure? I mean, you would know more about being male insecure than I would.
There's this big, brawny thing, this massive beast that goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Who the hell needs a truck that goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds? Come on.
Why not? Well, if it can, why not? I can't believe that I'm advocating for males, but look, is that
I wrote a blog post recently about this, about EV makers, that keep trying to one up each other on, acceleration and performance. And okay, you've proven conclusively that EVs are as fast as anything out there. Now stop. Okay, you've made your point. Just stop. This is ridiculous. We don't need people driving a vehicle this large. It's bad enough that we have so many people driving vehicles this large that you can't see out of, and then you pile all this performance on top of that. I think it's just ridiculous and socially irresponsible. And okay, fine, call me what you want.
It's an electric vehicle. Why isn't that the whole idea? Is that it's clean emissions, right?
But that's the only thing that's reasonable about this is that it's electric. If you're going off-roading, this thing is going to weigh 3 tons at least. This is going to be at least a 6,000-pound vehicle.
Yep.
And it's huge. And okay, yes, you're not, if you're driving, out in Moab or the Rubicon Trail, yes, you're not polluting the air with it, but you're still trampling on the environment with this thing.
Well, that's
the reality is that most people that buy these things are never going to go anywhere near those trails anyway. So they have no business owning something like this.
I don't know. I mean, first of all, they're not going to be building 200,000 or 300,000. These, right?
There's going to be a few thousand of these at most.
Yeah. So it's going to be, there is that aspect of it, and there's a lot of stuff that we don't need that people still buy. So need is very, very relative, and I just think, I think it's a lot of fun. I mean, I just pulled up the technology adoption curve. 2.5% of people are considered innovators and 13.5% are considered early adopters. So I do think that, you're looking at a small percentage of the marketplace, but this isn't a vehicle for every man. That's not the purpose of it. And, any more than like the Ford GT is built for every man. That's not built for everybody either. And so I think this is a fun way for GMC to showcase its EV capabilities. Because keep in mind too that GM really needs to make a mark in a world. If in fact we go in 15 years and California bans the sale of new gasoline vehicles, GM has to be part of that conversation. So from a corporate standpoint, I think that this is an important vehicle so that people start seeing GM as a technology leader as opposed to a legacy automaker. So strategically, I think this is an important vehicle for them.
And I understand why they're doing this as their first of their new generation of EVs. First of all, using Hummer. Hummer was the brand that epitomized the anti-green movement. In
Absolutely.
the late 2000s. This was the vehicle that environmentalists were going to dealerships and going in subdivisions and vandalizing these things because they were using so much gas. And to now have this vehicle be, the standard bearer for a new generation of GM electric vehicles, it's an interesting play on that. And certainly
I would love to have been in that meeting. I would have loved to have been in that meeting when somebody said, "Let's make Hummer EV."
And well, one of the interesting things about the briefing is, they started this project, beginning of April 2019. So they're only 18 months into this, which I think almost certainly is a somewhat misleading statement, because I think that while they probably greenlit the Hummer and started working on the Hummer version in April of last year, they have been clearly working on this platform and these battery electric vehicles, these battery systems and drive systems, for several years.
Yeah, it doesn't mean the engineering was started 18 months ago.
Yeah. So, what they started was, putting this new top hat on this platform 18 months ago. And, it'll be roughly 30 months by the time it gets into production next year. And my guess is that, even though in the first year of production, we're only going to see the Edition 1, even the later versions, the base version, which is going to cost $80,000, isn't coming till 2024.
Right.
I think that probably by the end of next year or early in 2022, we're going to see a Chevrolet pickup based on the same architecture that is going to be much more affordable. That's going to be the volume vehicle, not this vehicle. This is the Halo.
So I don't know if this would be too cannibalistic. I think that Chevy is I'm still thinking about those early adopters and these people who was going to buy a working man's EV truck. And I would like to also see them put it under the GMC brand. And again, I know there's some conflict because technically this is Hummer GMC or a GMC Hummer. But if people want more of a practical version of this vehicle, would GMC also?
Oh yeah, I'm sure there'll be a GMC as well.
So yeah. And again, I'm just thinking of who buys electric vehicles. A lot of the work I did in Saudi Arabia was centered around who buys electric vehicles and who doesn't. And so, I think one of the reasons that Tesla's been so successful is, despite all of the other issues that go along with it, is because they are building a car for these innovators and early adopters with a feeling of premium and luxury. So I think that I'd love to see this technology expanded across more GM products, but I do think that you have to be strategic and understand who's in the marketplace, even in 2024, who's going to be in the marketplace. It's only a couple of years away. So, I think that from a consumer perspective, they've done a good job of getting this vehicle with all the bells and whistles, with a high price point, because early adopters, they don't buy Chevy. That's what we've seen. They buy.
Yeah, they've had the opportunity to buy the Bolt for 4 years, and they've stayed away in droves.
Exactly. So let's try this strategy and go for it.
Yeah. No, purely from a marketing standpoint, I totally agree with you. I think that this was the right thing for them to do, but from any kind of rational standpoint, this vehicle makes no sense at all, and nobody should buy it.
Yes, but that's why you're the engineer and I'm the marketer.
Exactly. Yes, you're exactly right there. And with that, let's move on to some listener questions. So first up from Chris Meisenzahl. Sorry if I butchered your name there, Chris. Team, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the 2020 and 2021 Toyota 4Runner. I realize the drivetrain is super old, but that seems like both a strength and a weakness. Strength being that they're so crazy reliable. And they, of course, between the weight and the old drivetrain, they get horrible gas mileage. I definitely don't need one. I'm not going to argue there. But as I get into middle age, I kind of like the idea of day trips and long climbs with my dog into the Adirondacks and the Finger Lakes. We're in western New York, and of course we get a ton of snow and bad weather. I have to think that they're really overdue for a major redesign in the next couple of years. Seriously considering leasing a 21 TRD off-roader and then deciding in 3 years whether to buy it or walk away. What do you think? I think you've driven the 4Runner more recently than I have. So.
Yes, I have. As I recall, I had it over July 4th weekend last year, and I thought it was classically old school in the best possible way, if that makes sense. One of my girlfriends, actually my friend Lorraine, who I spoke with, I talked about earlier, she moved back from Australia back in 2002, I think it was 2004. And she bought a Toyota 4Runner, and I am pretty sure she still has that vehicle. And it's gone. She moved out to Montana. She was in Indian Health Services as a physician there for 5 years, imported her husband from Australia, and they were out there, and they drove that 4Runner. It still has the moose guard, which actually has saved her life on a number of occasions because she did hit a moose, in fact. And so, this thing has been through it, and continues to run. It just won't die. When I had the 4Runner last year, I had a lot of fun with it. First of all, you can fit a ton of stuff in it. We fit these 2 big club chairs that my mom had and that we were moving up to my sister's summer home in northern Massachusetts. And they just slid right in. I mean, it was kind of like, okay, we can fit one. And they're like, wait a minute, we can fit 2 of these things. And these are big, rounded arm chairs. And it's so old school. There's a level of authenticity that I think is hard to get in other vehicles. So I think you can't kill it. I think it's a lot of fun.
So what you're saying is it's not quite as refined as a Genesis GV80.
It's not quite as refined. But that's not what, if you're throwing your dog in there, if you're going up to the Adirondacks, by all means. Lorraine, by the way, lives in Middletown, New York. So, New York is huge, obviously, but she's in that area as well of, doing all sorts of off-road fun things with this thing. I think that my accounting background comes into play, though, when I say that financially, I do think that you have to watch the numbers when it comes to leasing and then purchasing. So that my only hesitation would be there. I also think that if you are going to be doing some significant off-roading in this thing, that when you go to turn it in, you want to make sure that you don't get dinged for any wear and tear when you turn in your leased vehicle. So and keep some of those things in mind as well. But I think the 4Runner is it's so old school that I loved it. And actually, I drove it all the way up to Massachusetts and back. So I drove it, about 500 miles, and I really liked driving it. It was fun. It wasn't, it's not the most comfortable car, but that's not why you buy it. And so I think that, it's still a Toyota. There's still a really good foundation there in that vehicle. So that's my take on it.
So Chris, if you like the 4Runner, get one, maybe lease it and make up your mind in 3 years what you want to do. Because you're right. Probably by that time, there will be a next generation 4Runner. Maybe not.
Yeah, I think the leasing idea, I would explore that a little bit more. Okay. If it's a payment issue, okay. But I don't think it's a bad idea to buy it.
All right. Well, let's
keep that in mind.
Let's stick with leasing. Scenarios. Let's stick with leasing for the next question. This one was from Ray D. During a recent show, you talked about leasing briefly. Would it be possible to do a segment and more fully explain the ins and outs of leasing? Some questions I have, assuming a 3-year lease with 15,000 miles a year and not buying the car at the end of the lease. How do I negotiate the best deal on a lease? The combination of lowest or no upfront money and lowest monthly payment, what out-of-pocket costs are associated with a new lease, what routine maintenance am I responsible for, do I need gap insurance? Kind of give us a little breakdown on leasing. It's obviously something more than just renting a vehicle for 2 or 3 years.
Right. So leasing, and keep in mind, it does depend upon the manufacturer, whether you're using their captive lease company, finance company. So leasing, I like to lease if you don't drive a lot of miles, but you want the reliability of a new car, and you like to have a new car every few years. And with the pace of technology evolution, it's not a bad idea if you like to have the latest technology to lease a vehicle. It's a way to get into a car that may be above your price point for less money, because you're really paying off the depreciation when you're leasing a vehicle. The cons of it are that you always have a car payment, basically, because you don't buy this thing and you don't have equity. So it's easy to get into the leasing cycle where every 2 to 3 years you are turning in a car that you have paid for, but you don't have any equity in it. And so if you want to get out of that leasing cycle, you've got to come up with the money for a down payment because you don't have a down payment. So,
but even if you're going to stay in the leasing cycle, a lot of times you still have to set aside some money over that lease term for the down payment on the next lease, right?
You do. It's typically not as much as if you were going to buy. So, it depends. Again, every transaction is so complicated because every transaction is so different. Every situation is so different. In terms of a 3-year lease, 15,000 miles. Miles per year, negotiating the best deal is really a matter of negotiating the value both from the MSRP, and then what are they looking at as the buyout value? That's the difference between, that's what your payment is. So if this vehicle it's a $50,000 vehicle and it has a $30,000 residual value, that $20,000 is what you're paying over the course of a 24, 30, or 36 or 39 month lease. If you are able to negotiate the MSRP from 50,000 to 45,000, and you're able to increase that residual value from 30 to 35, suddenly you're only paying $15,000 over the course of the term, and your payment's going to be less. So if you're leasing, you go in and try and negotiate the best deal on both ends, and certainly ask full disclosure. You want to read over everything in that contract when you're going into lease. Look carefully at your mileage. You may not need as much miles, especially nowadays without commuting. So maybe negotiate a 12,000 or even a 10,000 mile a year lease. So, and if you're running low on miles, 24 months into a 36-month lease, go in the dealership and say, can I swap this out? You can do that. They want to have good used cars because they can resell that thing.
Yeah. So, a lot of times you can turn it in early, if you're going to get it, if you're going to, go right into another new car, then a lot of times they'll give you a really good deal. And, manufacturers often have those kinds of deals, those early turn-in deals.
Exactly. Right. I mean, I would say I started leasing I leased for probably almost 9 years. I had 3 BMWs in a row that I leased all of them. And for me, it was a good experience. Once I started getting media cars, then it was a bad experience because I'm paying, a lot of money for a car that I really wasn't driving very much. I liked to lease because I was putting about 13 to 14,000 miles on the car. I frankly couldn't afford and shouldn't spend over $1,000 on a car payment. So I was able to get into a car that I wouldn't have been able to afford if I were to buy it. I definitely don't recommend going above a 60-month loan term. As you start to get into 72 and 84 months, you're never going to have equity. You're always going to be upside down in that loan. You're always going to owe more than the car is worth. So this is a good way to avoid that situation. But from a financial standpoint, certainly talk to your financial advisor. It also depends on the taxes, because sometimes from a company standpoint, if you have your own business, I think you can write off some of those expenses easier if it's a lease, but that may have changed. So don't take my word on that.
Well, yeah, my friend Leo Laporte,
yes,
he and his wife lease their vehicles because they're company vehicles.
Yes.
So they write those off on the taxes because it's as a business expense. So if you have that kind of situation, then yeah, it can make more sense to do a lease than a purchase in that kind of scenario.
Right. And then as far as routine maintenance, again, that varies because some companies like BMW had zero maintenance. In other words, it's kind of built into your lease. I remember talking to Porsche and they did not offer anything like that. So again, I think it varies by manufacturer, and it's been a while since I leased anything, so they may have changed that, but you will be responsible. Some manufacturers still charge you for some wear and tear. And again, when you turn in the vehicle, then they will oftentimes look and see, what kind of wear and tear is on it. As far as gap insurance, I do think that is recommended. I think that they often build that in now, though. And gap insurance is basically if something happens to the vehicle, if it's in an accident, if it's totaled, do you have to pay the difference between what you owe on it and what it's worth? So I'm a big fan of that kind of insurance. So I think I would certainly look into that. But again, it's on a transaction by transaction basis. So I'm sure there's listeners out there who don't have gap insurance. Every situation is different. And so these are just things that you need to explore. But Ray, I think you're asking all the right questions. And I think it's something that is good to explore for your specific situation and how you live and what your life stage is and what your financial condition is.
And I just want to add one last note on leasing. If you're looking to get an electric vehicle, leasing can actually be probably the best way to go if you're getting an EV, because you mentioned earlier, the technology is changing. It's certainly changing for EVs.
Absolutely.
And, one of the big challenges for EVs has been, the residual values on most EVs are really bad. But because manufacturers need to sell a certain number of EVs, especially if you live in places like California or the other states that mandate a certain percentage of EV sales, you can get some screaming deals on an EV. And another advantage is because with the tax credits on EVs, typically, if you were to buy an EV, in 2020, if you bought it in January of 2020, that the federal tax credit, you can't claim that until your 2021, until you file your 2020 taxes in 2021.
And you can't claim it if you lease.
Well, what happens is, whoever is purchasing the vehicle, which is the finance company, they're the ones that claim the tax incentive. So what happens is, whether it's GM Financial or anybody else, whatever the financing company is, they get that tax credit. They factor that into your lease payment. And so rather than waiting a year or more to get that back, that basically gets factored into your payment from day one. So that's why so many of the EV leases are so much, the monthly payments are so much cheaper, because they've already factored that in, because the leasing company is going to take that tax credit, whatever tax credits are available. So if you want to get an EV and you want to pay the lowest possible price, leasing is probably the best way to do it for that particular scenario.
Absolutely. No, you're 100% right. That it's really best if you are looking at an alternative propulsion vehicle to lease it. Absolutely 100%. So
and then if you do want to own it, buy a 3-year-old off-leased EV, because those are usually often dirt cheap.
Right. But then to our earlier the guy that was talking, Chris, that was talking about getting his 4Runner and leasing that and going off road with it. As I said, I do have concerns about when you go to turn that in. What that looks like.
Depending on if you're going off road and scratching up the paint, that could be a problem.
Because you're also when it comes to leasing, your interest rate on that lease is significantly higher than if you were to buy it. So that's why buying it, you're paying a lot of interest if you turn around and purchase the vehicle that you just leased for 3 years. So if you look at the overall amount of money that you've spent on interest, it can be really significant. So if you buy the vehicle then and you get 1 or 2% interest rate, then that may offset some of the interest that you've paid on your lease, but you are paying interest on your leased vehicle. So
the answer of whether to buy or lease is maybe.
Exactly. Do your homework.
All right. Well, with that, why don't we call it a show? And
right.
Thanks for joining us again. Keep sending us your questions at feedback@wheelbearings.media. We love to get these and talk through these and try to help you out. And any comments, and if you want to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're at listening to the shows, please do that. It helps us out. If you like the show, it helps us out. It helps people find the show. So, Rebecca, have a great week.
Sam, you too. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.